This is Wycombe Sound.
Hello everybody, you're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM at Wycombe Sound. I am your host, Dane Cobain. We'll be here for the next hour or so with, we have an interview each week. We go over to the Ilk Shed to get an album review from Twangling Jack Ford. We play some local music. We head over to the Rhylight Zone where we have a short story, poetry, all that kind of good stuff. And we just generally have a wonderful time. So as always, you can find us on Facebook if you search for The Art Show on Wycombe Sound. You can email me here on the studio on dane.cobain@wycombesound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain@wycombesound.org.uk. And I particularly want to hear from local creators, artists, painters, poets, musicians, craftspeople, dancers, choreographers, you name it. If you do anything cool and arty, I want to hear from you. Especially if you have MP3s or announcements that I can share on the show, or if you think you'd be a cool guest as well. So in this week's show we're going to be having a chat to local poet Nigel Cresswell, but before we do that we're going to head over to the Rhylight Zone and we're going to listen to some of Nigel's poetry. So over to Nigel.
This is kind of an experiment to see how this goes down. This is called Saxophone Ghosts. John Coltrane's ghost gives voice to spectral saxophone. Nearly 60 years in limbo, silent, alone. Now it soars and swings, makes my heart and soul sing. John Coltrane. The Lost Album. Both directions at once. Lost since 1963. Finally flying free. The Ghost of Coltrane brought company. A saxophone medium, he didn't come alone. He brought my father back to me. We sat wrapped in the music. John Coltrane, my father, and me. While sax and drums and piano and bass gloriously fly free. Notes as songbirds, caged unfairly, back in 63, and gloriously flying free around. John Coltrane, my father, and me.
Christopher Robin is 100 years old now. He sits in his leather armchair by the fire, balloon of cognac in his hand, hind antique, golden warmth conjuring memories and friends, the 100-acre wood, Piglet and Pooh, hide and seek. Christopher Robin is 100 now. All sides of the child are becalmed. Tigger has given up bouncing. He says it's not dignified at his age. They 2 minutes of the Pistols. He was pretty chilled these days. He's doing a lot of pot. Piglet and Pooh, still in the 100-acre wood. Still wandering, idly musing, kicking leaves through the 100-acre wood. True friends, relaxed, talking random rubbish, so gently ignoring the adult pressure to join in. I bought a rose from the interweb. I waited for it to arrive, and I waited. And I waited until irritation begins to rise, and emails and phone calls till eventually a refund, but no rose. A disappointment, a sigh. 2 months later, I found the package, weather wrecked, badly damaged. stupidly hidden in an impossible passage by a driver with no mind. I opened it with a sinking heart, and then I just wanted to cry. A dead stick, grey roots so sick I felt like I had committed a crime. I took it down the garden as an act of faith and planted it anyway, with a closed eye, wish and hope. I checked on my rose today. It has made my spirits fly. My Lazarus rose is not just alive. My Lazarus rose has thrived. The Lazarus rose will bloom this year, as will you and I. Tethered titans stride this land, whispering, crackling incantations on the breeze. The new ley lines, paths of power that fly above the peaceful fields, while in between the goshawk hunts like nothing ever changed. The air itself has stolen my valley. It has cloaked my woods, enfolding, wrapping the skeletal trees in grey. There is no wind, no breeze. The soft air reminds me that feeling free does not require a vista. It is just the state of being me. White blossom now, cherries soon. So strong, so tall, so proud. Fourth time around. First time a community garden where it really hated the soil. Then another community garden sadly vandalised. Then my front garden where it really didn't take. So then the back. Now it blossoms. Now it shines with white flowers and hope. Lives can be saved. It just takes patience, time, and hope. Love. It is the small, passing touches that show it. At the party, socialising, the soft touches as you pass and gently kiss. Love. It is the fleeting soft touch at the breakfast table, because neither can leave nor live without. Soft touches. Love. The gentle things that abide. Soft touches in a life lived side by side. Love. Soft touches that speak of the understanding of souls so deeply entwined, even when now alone. She walks around her home. Rather, she walks as best she can, softly touching the things he loved. Memories caressed and held. Love. Softly and gently touching his soul with an angel feather kiss. I wake up and I smell her burning toast. I watch her face in the window's ghost over storm dark clouds that are blown from the coast, where she saves her silver linings for those that need them most. She laughs and scrapes the blackened bread. Sweet, soft echoes of a love near dead. Spilling crumbs, she comes back to bed, and on my grateful chest she lays her head. I am alone again with my soft-eyed saviour, with words I pray are left unsaid. 7 centuries back time now, the lovers first hold hands, then take vows, holding hands, at the chapel of St. Morel. She dares to ask, how long will you love me, my love? He pledges, until we are dust, my love. I will love you till we are dust. The lovers live long, the lovers love well, always seen holding hands, till we are dust, became their mantra spell, known far and wide for their endless love, for the depths of their lover's well. So, with life but not love over, they are lain together, fingers forever entwined. How long will you love me, my love? I will love you till we are dust. It was a beautiful twilight tonight. Gold-edged strips and burnished wisps of cloud. A celebration of a day. Bathed in flat and neutral winter light, at a time when celebration feels disallowed. It feels like a sigh, a small delight, as the sky morphs from gold to red, it silhouettes a cloud of kites, and so, oppressed by loneliness, injury and COVID, I smile, wrapped up in this beautiful, beautiful gift of twilight.
Alright, that was Nigel Cresswell with some of his poetry for this week's Rhylight Zone. We're going to have a little bit of music and then we're going to hop on the phone and chat to Nigel himself. So this is Jordana Blake with U-Shaped Hole. Jordana was the very first person we had on the show way back, 60 episodes ago. So big shout out to Jordana.
Take me walking through the park, through the brambles, through the dark, and I still have the sky and a home, you shaped So toss your ego in the sea. Don't want me, that's news to me. 'cause I still live rent free in your enemy-shaped
You could be driving in your car. You could be walking your dog. You might just be working. But whatever you're doing, you're also listening to Wycombe Sound 106.6 FM. And if you're in business, your potential new customers could be listening too. So talk to them and let them know what you have to offer. Radio is a cost-effective and proven way to get your message across. And Wycombe Sound 106.6 FM could put together an affordable package that could work for you. So call 01494 449900 or email contact@wycombesound.org.uk.
Someone jogging, walking their dog or working out in the park is highly likely to have COVID-19. This is a national health emergency. Around 1 in 3 people have no symptoms and are spreading it without knowing. So exercise locally. If you're on your own, you can meet one other person. But keep your distance. Exercise, don't socialise. And wash your hands the moment you get home. Stop the spread. Stick to the rules. If you bend the rules, people will die. Stay home. Protect the NHS. Save lives.
That was Shaped Hole by Jordana Blake. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wycombe Sound. I am your host, Dane Cobain, and we're going to head over to have a little chat with poet Nigel Cresswell. Over to Nigel. The first question I ask everybody is, what was the last book that you read and what did you think of it?
Oh, the last book I read, or reread, to be honest, was The Redundancy of Courage by Timothy Moe. And I reread it because I think it's stunning. I've loved that book for a long time. I don't know whether you know anything about the situation with Indonesia invading East Timor.
No. Could you let us know?
Well, no, it's set in East Timor at the time of the Portuguese pullout, which, of course, in the same way throughout the entire imperialized world, as the Europeans pulled out of different places, they left them open to. So for a brief moment, the East Timors thought, hey, we got a freedom. And then came Indonesia. And it's about a character called Adolf Nook. It's just NG.
Yeah.
But it's first person singular from his viewpoint.
Awesome.
And he regards himself as an absolute coward. And yet, throughout the story, he commits acts of greater and greater and greater and greater courage. Mostly because he has to, but eventually because he has a moral choice to make. It's a stunning, stunning novel.
That sounds fascinating, that like kind of character development.
It is brilliant because you want to hate him and you can't. And at the end, you're just cheering for him. But I don't want to go too far into it because the end is the point of the novel and the point of the title, The Redundancy of Courage.
Cool.
And you need to get to that by reading the novel.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's not what Timothy Moe intended.
And how many times have you read it? So obviously at least twice.
About 4.
One of the main things I obviously want to talk to you about is your poetry And so you did a poetry set at Wycombe Arts Centre recently, and all of the poems there were kind of inspired by music and musicians. And I wondered, what is it about music and poetry that makes them work so well together, in your opinion?
They're two sides of the same coin. My best friend is a singer-songwriter. He's the one that lives in China, by the way. And the poetry he writes as songs cannot work as poetry, spoken word. When I try to write songs, a couple have worked, especially back in the day. But to be honest, I am a spoken word poet. And that's it. And I don't know what the difference is. My love of music comes from my father. It's because I've always had music around, and very diverse music. He loved world music, he loved African music, Cuban music. He just loved music. So, I love music, but I certainly don't specifically write about music. In fact, it's quite rare. But when I go to an open mic event which is predominantly music, and they have some musical based pieces I can do, then I'll perform those rather than the other pieces, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how long have you been writing poetry for?
Since, well, I can say absolutely specifically since I was 10.
Okay.
Because that was the poem called A Stand of Trees. And it's kind of about Dutch elm disease as it came about in 1974. And I was at middle school. We weren't allowed in the woods. We started off, you just weren't allowed to touch the trees with bands on them. Then you just weren't allowed in the woods. That felt horrible. But also, I came from very kind of politicized parents at height of the Cold War. So I wrote a very short poem. It's just trees stand in conversation, throw their voices on the wind, not talking to the dying ones, the Dutch trees and our king. So height of the Cold War, not allowed in the woods because of Dutch elm, and just felt the right thing. But I was 10 years old.
And that's amazing, and you still remember it as well.
Yes, it's the first poem in my book.
Cool. And I was going to ask you, because when you performed at the Arts Centre, you did I think at least one poem, maybe two poems from memory, and then you read one from paper as well. And I just wondered, how do you memorize your poems? Is it just sheer repetition, or do you have any tricks?
No, I'm a trained actor.
Okay.
I studied drama, so learning lines is learning lines.
Yeah.
When you happen to write them, that gives you a certain advantage. Although you can really get it wrong. Quite often you stumble or you misplace a line. And the acting training just means you skip over it with a fill line if there's one in your head. Unfortunately, the first time I really discovered that was when I was at college studying drama. And I wrote a play called Act of Disappearance, mainly to fit a poem called Act of Disappearance. It was basically about Amnesty International, and it was for Amnesty International, and so on and so forth. The line that completely dried on me at the actual kind of, you can't call it judging, the exam performance, act of disappearance. The title line gone.
And it's an ironic line as well to forget.
Kind of, yes. I managed to cover it because by jumping to the next line, which was still there, you can continue the poem and it still makes sense, but it loses its import, etc. We still got decent marks, but I wrote the thing and I lost the title line.
So cool. And would you say, again, with your sort of acting training, obviously that ability to, I suppose, to react under pressure is useful, but do you think it helps your performance and your delivery of your poems as well?
To be honest, no. I think the reason I went and studied drama was because I was already the poet. I loved reading out loud. I helped bring up 2 little girls, and I was the one that always read to them. It was a weird kind of bohemian sort of time. I was roadie for a band, quite well known around here, called El Joanna. And I was effectively roadie stroke nanny for the drummers' kids. And I always read them their bedtime stories. And reading out loud to children, if you have an acting bent in you, is just the greatest pleasure in the universe. And I met the eldest of the 2 at one of Dad's gigs a few years ago. She's about 22 at the time. And the first thing she said to me was, "Danny, champion of the world!" Because it had stuck in her. I love, well, unkind people that know me would say I love the sound of my own voice. I don't. I love writing, knowing how I would speak a piece.
Yeah.
If you see what I mean. And that's really why I went and studied, and just to refine it, so I can continue that. It was a writing tool, studying drama, more than anything else.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. And so, who are some of the poets whose work you really enjoy?
I like Stevie Smith. I mean, there are poets I'm in awe of, and every poet should be. Seamus Heaney, and so on and so forth. And there is the poetic community online, which is fabulous now. And there are so many poets in that community that I really admire, that you can't list them. And I don't know that we're all struggling for recognition or anything. We'd like to see our stuff out there. Famous poets, I don't know I could list too well. Certainly Seamus Heaney is at the top of the list. But it's more the obscure writers that spring into my mind. Richard Brautigan. I don't know whether you've ever heard of Richard Brautigan.
I'll give him a Google.
I was a 70s writer, 60s, 70s, old hippie dude, basically, writing hippie dude type stories. Completely off the wall, absolutely beautiful. And I think his last novel was the most poetic, and it's called So the Wind Won't Blow It All Away, which ironically bombed so badly. You know, the hippie era was over.
Yeah.
People, it was 1980-ish. People were, that's hippie dippy stuff.
Yeah.
And it ended up in remainder bins really quite quickly, which is how I got to know Richard Waterkin. It was the first one I bought. But because it bombed so badly, and it's the one that he put his heart and soul in, committed to suicide in 1981.
That's awful.
It is, especially when you read the book, because it is so beautiful. As a lot of hippy dippy stuff was, it's just it was suddenly out of fashion when he published it.
You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wycombe Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. We're in conversation here with local poet Nigel Cresswell. And we're going to have a little bit of music. And this is another local poet who's also a musician and songwriter. This is Puddles by Clive Whitelock.
And life's getting boring. I can't sleep at night 'cause my neighbor is snoring. All the same, what's my name? What's my game? How do I live? With these puddles in my head and I'm feeling half dead. Can't understand just how I do it. Puddles in my head and I'm feeling half dead. Can't understand just how I do it. Sitting in my room, my coffee cup empty. Same with my wallet and there's holes in my shoes. Feel like Napoleon just after Waterloo. Everything beckons, there's nothing to do with these puddles in my head. And I'm feeling half dead. Can't understand just how I do it. Puddles in my head, and I'm feeling half dead. Can't understand just how I do it.
That was Puddles by Clive Whitelock. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wycombe Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and I'm here in conversation with local poet Nigel Cresswell.
How do you approach writing a poem? I mean, do you start with an idea or like something that you want to say, or do you just sort of have a pen and paper and see what comes out?
Closest would be the last. It's just always have a pen with you, always have paper. And it's about being in the world, about how you perceive things and suddenly go, whoa, that's surprisingly beautiful, or that's could be seen as profound, or that's, do you know what, it's just being ready for whatever occurs to my scatterbrain butterfly mind. And when something hits, write it down.
Yeah. I mean, do you carry it around with you?
Yes. Always.
I guess that's like piece one of advice to anybody who wants to get into writing of any kind, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Don't be without paper. Don't be without a nice pen.
Yeah.
Preferably a nice pen. Because you just feel better using it, and you write better words with a better pen. I just think you do.
Yeah. And I mean, I suppose it like the medium that you write in would affects the writing, doesn't it? So if you sit down in front of a typewriter, you're going to come up with something different than if you sat down with a pen and paper, maybe,
I
or
don't
if you
think
write on your phone or something.
I don't think I've ever written on a typewriter or a computer first.
Yeah.
I've always sketched down a skeleton, at least, of a poem or piece of prose with a pen on paper, because it forces you to slow enough to think about how words fit with each other, let alone lines.
Mm.
And especially if you're looking for great phonetic flow, you can't do that if you're typing words on it. You can't do that, because all you can hear is the rattle of the keys. With pen and paper, you effectively internally hear the words. And that's a big difference when you're trying to write creatively.
Mm. And especially, I would imagine, poetry that you're going to perform at spoken word, you need to pay attention to the way the words sound, the way the sentences sound.
Absolutely. And I always write to be heard rather than read. I hope that my work works both ways. And certainly when I publish on the various poetry sites, it seems to. But yeah, I really write to perform.
Yeah. And you mentioned the poetry sites there. So, I mean, how useful are they for you to sort of get the word out? And also, I suppose, do you find new poets to read through these sites as well?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. I publish on one international site called Cosmo Funnel, which is probably the biggest art site.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's happening with them at the moment. It's virtually impossible to upload to them at the moment. With pandemic everywhere, you don't know. They're based in California. So I've got quite a large worldwide following via them.
Mm-hmm.
But to be honest, I think the best poetry site I've found in this country is via Facebook, and it's Northern Poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And they're wonderful.
Awesome.
The standard of the poetry is just breathtaking. And I've met some really inspiring and very encouraging poets through these sites. So, yeah, I mean, if you are a writer, get yourself out onto the sites that suit your genre and join the community.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And because you mentioned community a few times, and I think that's a really, really nice thing about the poetry sort of environment,
Mm-hmm.
and especially with online sites being able to bring people together. And I think you recently, am I right in thinking you did a virtual open mic recently, didn't you? Wasn't that based in somewhere?
Yes, that was with Sail Out Loud. So Sale, as in SALE, Greater Manchester, not selling things like an auction. I mean, I've never been to Sale, but because of this pandemic, everybody's doing these things online. And suddenly, I'm doing an open mic in Greater Manchester. Anytime I've been to Greater Manchester, I was going through it on the motorway on a very fast motorbike.
Sounds about right, yeah. Cool. And I was going to ask, and I'm assuming your answer to this isn't going to be Sale, Greater Manchester, but if you could perform your poems anywhere in the world, where would it be and why?
That's a really interesting question. I would love to perform my poetry at Gladstone's library, the first ever public library that he donated all of his books to. That's where I'd like to perform above anywhere else. Definitely.
Awesome. Cool. And so obviously you've got some, people can read some of your poems on some online sites. And you've can you tell us about the collaboration you did recently as well, the one you sent me the link over to?
Oh, that was Graham Marshall, and it's called Visions of Sound, and it's Mixcloud / Visions of Sound, visions all being capital, of small, sound big. Episode 7, Nigel Cresswell, and it's an hour where the same poems that you have are backed by a soundscape and music to create a kind of whole, I suppose. Yeah, it's quite experimental, but it's working really well. And he managed to cover up the background sound while I was recording by basically adding the sound of an open fire and a ticking grandfather clock.
Awesome.
Which worked brilliant. Yeah.
And can you tell us about your recording woes and some of the creative ways you managed to find to try and cut down on noise?
Yeah, I used every bit of bubble wrap in the house. So yeah, there was a fair amount of it. Used every bit of bubble wrap in the house to cover my windows. But I live on a rat-run road, much favoured by the idiots in the V8 Mercs and the M-series Beamers, especially the old ones that really rattle, and the Impreza boys and the Evo boys. Yay! And even then, he still had to add the background sound of the fire and the ticking clock.
It's amazing how you managed to get it done, isn't it?
Yeah, and the really annoying thing is, it was during the first lockdown. I have friends with studios. I have friends with soundproof rooms. Couldn't go and visit them. I could have phoned up my mate and said, "Can I use your studio for half hour?" No. So all of the bubble wrap that's ever come from Amazon was stuck on my windows.
Well, at least you got some use out of it, I suppose.
Well, yeah, and then I was so frustrated at the end of it, I got to pop it all to make myself feel better.
Amazing. Cool. So a bit of a fun question, but I think it's got a serious undertone as well. So it's four words. Can poems kill fascists?
They can't kill fascists. They can encourage people to fight them.
I like that. Okay. And in terms of poetry, what for you at least, what makes a good poem?
I have absolutely no idea, and if I can ever define it, I'll probably stop writing because I've found formula.
Yeah.
And that should never happen.
Yeah.
I've no
Especially
idea.
with poetry.
Yeah. Poetry is, I think, a form of verbal empathy. And as a result, I have no idea what makes good or bad.
Yeah.
And I don't particularly want to know.
Yeah.
Right, what occurs.
Well, it's almost, I suppose, there is because it's a form of empathy. That's sort of so subjective to everybody in every situation as well. That there is,
and every environment. The environment you're in changes the way you feel. It's being able to translate the way you feel, or the way a situation makes you feel, or whatever, into words that scan in a way that hopefully transfer that emotion over in the words. I don't know how often I pull that off, but that's always the intent.
Yeah. Cool. So just a couple more questions just to end on. I guess one of them is what's next for you? What have you got planned next? More poems?
Well, yeah, I can't stop writing poems. That's just they occur, you write them.
Yeah.
As for longer term projects, I do have one that is very long term. I come from a tiny little village in the Lake District called St. Bees. And in 1982, they found a casket when they were doing an archaeological survey of the site of what used to be the South Chancellery of St. Bees Priory, which is, or was at the time, a very important monastic site. So anybody buried in the South Chancellery, pretty important. This casket was made of lead, and they cracked it open, and it was actually being filmed. This geezer hadn't decomposed. As fresh corpse smell came off this corpse. He was 430 odd years old, but because of the way he'd been, and because of the level of preservation, we now know thanks to a couple of local St. Bees historians, John Todd and I'm afraid the other name's vanished. We know his name, Sir Anthony de Lucy. We know when he was extant. We know why he was on a crusade in the Northern Crusades. We know it was a penitent crusade. We know what his crime was. We know how he died and where he died. All because his body was incredibly well preserved. We know that he had porridge for breakfast with nuts and fruit. There was liquid blood in his liver. So they could do an autopsy on a 450-year-old man. I want to tell his whole story, first person or semi-first person, perhaps because it's a good tool to use, perhaps as a knight's squire describing his knight's actions. But yeah, I mean, he must have been seriously rated by the Teutonic knights who he was fighting with, for them to go to the efforts they did to seal his body in lead to such a degree that 450 years later, they can do an autopsy. I mean, seriously, you've got to write about that.
Yes, yeah, for sure. That's
if you are fascinated by that, there's a program called The Medieval Dead, which you can find on, I think, UK TV Play. And the episode's just called The St. Bees Night.
Cool. And presumably, has that got like the footage of when they opened it up for the first time and stuff?
Yes.
Amazing.
And you can see the reaction of everybody around that grave.
Yeah.
Stepping back because it's the smell of fresh death.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy.
50 years.
Wow, cool. And so where would you say is best for people to go to find out more about you? Is it just easiest to Google you?
I'm not sure what you'd find Google other than a couple of references, Cosmo Funnel. Cosmo Funnel is a good place because you can just put my name into the search and you'll get all of my pages, which is the vast majority of my poems. Or Northern Poetry, or my book, Puddle Cat Poems, is available on Amazon.
Big thank you to Nigel Cresswell for joining us. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wycombe Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and we're going to head over to a little bit more music, and this is Tony Goff and the Broken Colours with Rearrange. It's a banger. I love this song. It's great.
every day, seeing the same old faces and the same old names. I'm climbing to find me a real safe space. You're struggling to stay afloat. Every breath may be our last. It's time for a change while you have the chances. Time for a change while you have the chance. Time for a change while you have the chance. Oh, rearranging, everything's changing. Like in the town, can't find the motivation. Trying to figure out just who I am. 'Cause I can't remember that shell of a man. Test your limits to find your key. You're breaking hearts to know you're free. Missing out on what I need most. I'm not a person, I'm just a healing post. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. Do what scares you, baby, don't ever hesitate. Rearranging, everything's changing. Like in the time, can't find the motivation. Try to figure out just who I am. 'Cause I can't remember that shell of a man. Change your life while you have the chance. You better change your life while you have the chance. Change your life while you have the chance. Oh. Of a man.
You could be driving in your car. You could be walking your dog. You might just be working. But whatever you're doing, you're also listening to Wycombe Sound 106.6 FM. And if you're in business, your potential new customers could be listening too. So talk to them and let them know what you have to offer. Radio is a cost-effective and proven way to get your message across. And Wycombe Sound 106.6 FM could put together an affordable package that could work for you. So call 01494 449900 or email contact@wycombesound.org.uk.
Someone on your bus, on your train, or waiting at the platform is highly likely to have COVID-19. This is a national health emergency. Around 1 in 3 people have no symptoms and are spreading it without knowing. So you should only travel if it's essential. Always cover your nose and mouth, keep a safe distance from others, and wash your hands the moment you arrive. Stop the spread. Stick to the rules. If you bend the rules, people will die. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
That was rearranged by Tony Goff and the Broken Colours. You're listening to The Archie on 106.6 FM Wycombe Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. We're going to head over to the Ilk Shed now to catch up with Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review. And if all has gone well, this is going to be a John Coltrane review to tie back in with Nigel's poem earlier on. Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review.
Both directions at once. The lost John Coltrane album. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon in April, and I was hosting the open mic in the Arts Centre garden. It was the first one of the year. Nigel asked if he could do some poems between acts and told me the background behind his John Coltrane piece. I was sold. I went and bought the CD. The album is interesting because it was never released at the time. The music on it was totally eclipsed by the groundbreaking album that was recorded soon after and was released in its place. That album was a love supreme, a piece in 4 movements with classical percussion, dreamy, spacey interludes, long solos, and an earworm motive, both chanted and played. The kind of thing that would have made many a mod or rocker at the time take up the mantle of prog rock. And on a prog note, the release of this Coltrane album would be like the release, if it ever happens, of the album Pink Floyd abandoned to work on Dark Side of the Moon. After A Love Supreme, Coltrane headed down the path of free jazz, making very challenging records, but this album is more like the end of his more commercial jazz period. It is more like the Coltrane landmarks of Blue Train and My Favourite Things. You can hear him trying out different things on different versions of the same idea, and sometimes he uses well-known themes like Nature Boy. The accompanying piano is harmonically smooth and interesting without being unduly challenging. Coltrane's sax playing varies between lilting melody and a staccato machine gun barrage of notes, filling the space with arpeggios and rapid ascents, descents and giant leaps in modal scales. This album hits a sweet spot where his quest to extend the expressional capabilities of his instrument had only resulted in relatively short bouts of honking and squawking, which adds something to this, even if in his later years they just served to alienate him. Both directions at once, starting in the middle of a sentence and going to the start and the finish at the same time. Well, that's what it says on the cover notes. John Coltrane, The Lost Album.
Thank you very much to Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review. Thank you to everyone whose music I played, and in particular to Nigel Cresswell for joining us for a chat and for sharing some of his poems. You've been listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wycombe Sound. I am your host, Dane Cobain. And it's time for us to love you and leave you. Reminder though, before we do that, you can find us on Facebook if you search for The Art Show on Wycombe Sound. You can also email me here at the studio on dane.cobain@wycombesound.org.uk. I would love to hear your feedback. And also, again, if you're a local creative, artist, that sort of thing, do let me know, and we'll try and shout you out, maybe even get you on as a guest. And yeah, one final tune here, and this is Dizzy Fish with Will We Talk. I'll see you next week.
This is Wycombe Sound.